Okay, so I want to get the flow again from Moishe Dalit again. So what's the Maimer saying? The Maimer, the Shaila that the Torah should start with a Chedesh Zelachem is because Das Elyon Yichudi Lo should be primary and not Breishis, which is Das Tachten and Yichud Tato. The answer is, but that's the Kavanah. The Kavanah Pnimi is the Betachtonim. So it's Das Tachten and Yichud Tato. That's overall. But the koyach, it's to do the avodah, this itself comes from Torah, which is why Torah begins with Torah, which altogether is Yichudi Ilah, as explained earlier. Torah itself says that the kavanah is das tachten Yichud Tato, and that means that Torah empowers it. In the words of the Maimer Kabbalah, the Amshocha of Shema, which is Atzilus, the Milui is Aleph, that's Torah in Shemban, Begematri Behema, which is Malchus, which is the Makabel, which is Elam Hazan, the Shamas the Guf. So Shemban is Makabel from Shema. This is a Kabbalistic dynamic that Chassidus explains, and we just did it just now. Now, in Ois Dalit, he said, the Beprotius, so Das Elyon is already present at the outset in the very pasuk Breishis, which talks about overall Das Tachten creation, Tishrei Melamata Lamayla as opposed to Nisan, which is Lamayla Lamata, that's Das Elyon. Because Breishis begins with Shemayim before Oretz. And explains that's inside Giluyim, Shemayim is higher. And moreover, Shemayim gives the empowerment. But again, the Kavanah is Oretz, which is why the account of creation concludes with not Shemayim v'Oretz, but B'yoyim Aseis Hashem Alikim as a Oretz versus Shemayim. Oretz first and paramount. That's the end of the account because that's the Tachlis. Now, Ois was elaborated on this whole idea that's koyach masif higid liyami lasis lem nachlas goyim that takalachatchile nosna lahem tachten. But the point is, we take the tachten and we elevate it, and then he gives it to us. That's our avodah, and therefore the avodah has to be dafke b'derech and so on. And that's the general picture of the neshama coming down to the guf. The neshama doesn't need fixing, but it comes down to elevate the guf. And there has to be koyach maisov. That's the diak in Rashi from the Medrash. Koyach maisov. Maisa means to force. Kviya is kafia. And that should even be limited. He had in brackets a limited Torah. That limited Torah has to be in a way of more than one's habitual habit, which is why 101 times is far more incomparable to reviewing 100 times, because that goes beyond the nature, the ordinary methodology of learning. And that's the Maila of Oivd Hashem, Begufam of Oivd Hashem Benishmosam. And that's why at the end, Pasach Breishis, because that's a Tachnas Kavanah. But then he said at the end of the Ois, and then you come to Das Elyon Yichudi Lo, which comes later, Pashat, and that's ha'chedesh Zelachem, as explained at length earlier in the Maimer. And the final words of the Maimer that I want to address, which we did briefly, I said we'll revisit it. And moreover, let's begin again. For Yeseidim is the final words of Ois Hey. Final, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 lines to the bottom approximately. We say by the end of 2, 3 lines, 3 words from the end. We say them is not only do we proceed from Das Tachen to Das Elyon, but moreover, that would compromise the kavanah. What is the kavanah? Shegam la'achar adam is alibavidosa, even after a person reaches his level, it sins. Das Elyon ve'yichudi ilo, And he's holding by the level of Das Elyon and the higher unity, which is Malamayda Lamata. He's in the world of, exclusive in the world of Kedusha. Like his hapcha. Still, tzorich she shoyed etzloi roishim imadreges das tachten vichudetata. There has to remain with him. Roishim means literally the impression of the avoid of das tachten vichudetata. And the question is, why in heaven's name would that be so? Why hang on to das tachten, which is a compromised perception? And it's a compromised perception because it comes as a result of our inherent limitations. If he's holding by Yichudi Ilah, it's a shocking statement. Why should this remain? It's Das Tachten. He's now Baruch Hashem holding by Das Elyon. He's living with the perception of the divine, of Bittul b'Metzias, not Bittul Layesh. He's holding by his Hapchen, not his Skafia. No, they should remain the Rishima. What does this mean? Now in brackets he adds, in terms of explanation, but we need to understand what he's adding. So we read it quickly, and I said we'd revisit it. We're going to do that now. The Alter Rebbe addresses this briefly, and it's very bekitz and an allusion. It's mamish an allusion, if I'm learning Pshat correctly. I just bounced it off Shalom Ber Cohen. He says, yeah, could be. All right, so we got a nod from him, which is nice. So there the Alter Rebbe says in Chinuch Kotten, it's called Chinuch Kotten, that's what it's called there. Chinuch Kotten. D'Akdom b'Teshara Yichud. He writes it like this. Educated child according to his way, gam ki yaskin, because that's, if you do that, then when he gets older, le'yosim, he will not depart from it. The deeper meaning there is, when the tzaddik, the yid, ascends from level to level, there's got to be the bittul of the previous level. He's got to fall from his first level. The classic example, please tell me, what the most dramatic example brought in Chassidus is what? Rabbi Zayda? No?
He fasted.
Who fasted?
Bavli Tirashalmi.
Huh?
Bavli Tirashalmi.
To forget Talmud Bavli to learn Talmud Yerushalmi. That's in the nefila. So what happens in between time? So it says the Alter Rebbe, so when that's in the nefila, and that's expressed in the pasuk Sheva Yipel Tzaddik, the tzaddik falls 7 times and rises. That's that nefila. Here's the concluding point. What happens in that fallen stage? A trace is left of the former level. Now he's bringing this as a parallel, that even as he's holding by Yichudi Ilah, there is still, he carries with him Yichud Tata. What does this mean? What does it mean that is in his fall from one level to the other, he carries the trace, the Rishima of the previous level? These are just words. What in heaven's name do they mean? So l'chura, perhaps it means this. Maybe you can help me, because this is what I was thinking. At 4 o'clock this morning, because I was woken up by a skunk outside my bedroom. Okay, so that's it. I'm up. What am I gonna do? So I was thinking, you tell me, when do we find the word Rishima? Another place I see this Rishima. Speak up, man.
The Kav leaves the Rishima. The Kav.
The Kav, yeah. No, so give me some detail. How does Kabbalah describe the whole emergence of the Kav? You're right. That's the address. Okay, we're focusing on the right spot on the map. But what are we talking about? Anybody wants to add detail? Classic 101 Kabbalah Chassidus, the story of creation, as outlined in one paragraph in h'tשכ, which the whole Chassidus is built on. The beginning, no. Betchila, you know the words by heart. Beginning, the Ein Sof filled everything. And then, Silik, Es eure Hagodol Latzad. We know this issue not by heart really. It's quoted constantly, and it's so deceptively simple that needs depth and nuance. Hashem removed his great light to the side, but the remains of the great light, the reshimo, the trace, that's where that word appears. So what does all this mean? We have to strip this of its physicality and I don't know what's in your head, but we've got to think about this in abstractions, in Indian concept. So we'll try and convey it. Overtly, as a result of the tzimtzum, there's hella concealment. What's a trace that's left? The trace that left is the atzmizdike pnimius hakavona. Why is this all happening? Why create this hella? Because the tachlis hakavona is to be the ultimate gil of the Eir Ein Sof, where? In hella metachten. That's the Rishimu. It's the underlying essential purpose of it all that is carried through every step of creation, the process of creation. Somewhat clear? That's the Rishimu. The Kavona Pnimius. It's Atzmizdik. It's not Gilui. It's the Atzmizdik intent for the whole thing. What drives everything is the Nisav HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael Baruch Hu B'tachtoin. Now applying that model to here. He's saying that even after the person has progressed from Yiskafia to Yishapcha, or Yichud Tato, Yichud Ilah, there remains the trace of, and there must remain the trace, that's the old Kavana of Yiskafia. What's the meaning of that? So let's unpack this. Yishapcha is a beautiful state. And once you reach there, all is transformed, Giluyim, revelation, it's wonderful. Yiskafia is break. Scuffy is a very gritty, difficult, straining place. Constant struggle with Nefesh Bahamis. The tzaddik who's transformed, he's floating free. He's in the world of holiness. Temptations irk him, disgust him. He's in the world of Kedusha. But what's the Ma'ale of Iskafia? The Ma'ale of Iskafia is this, friends. Simple question. Why are you doing Iskafia? Why are you really breaking yourself for? Have a nice time in the Elam Hazeh, make a nice living, enjoy life, a little indulgence here and there. What's the problem? Or a big indulgence. What's wrong? This is the reality. What did Jews say? The main thing is to be healthy. What's driving this? What drives Iskafia? What? The answer is, this atzmizdike, I'm a Jew, it can't be like this. What drives Iskafia is a much deeper connection than Ishapcha. What drives Ishapcha is this is wonderful. Giloy, love God, and awe of God. Light, revelation. It's a big challenge in the world of Ishapcha to have this essential connection. And paradoxically, it's dafke in the struggle. Why are you struggling? Just forget the whole thing and have a good time in the Lamas. Be a nice guy too and get some honor. Be frum and at best of both worlds. You get honor, you Talmid Chacham, sit up the Mizrach, and enjoy everything the world has to offer. Why not? So what drives this Iskafia is because the Neshama is rooted in Atzmos, and that Gebishter wants a dir b'tachtonim, so he's not at peace. What do you want to say? But speak loud. You're shaking your head.
Just sneezed.
Huh?
Just sneezed.
Yes, I thought you were saying. You hear what I'm saying? What drives Iskafia Adarabah is the etzem verbund connection that the neshama has with the Eibishter that's restless and cannot make peace with the world and just have a good time. There's a kavanah and there's mitzvahs. That's what drives it. Why break yourself? Why do this? From the get-go. That's what he means. You've got to carry the Iskafia, the Yichud Tata, even as he reaches Yichud Ilah, which is all glory and revelation. Don't lose the Nekudah. Why? It's so easy to get lost in Isapcha, in the enjoyment of it all, the pleasure, the delight. To remember, why all of this? Because that's what the Eibishter wants. And that Atzmizdik, I'm a Yid, and I can't make peace with this. And there's something I'm going to share with you a story we haven't said in a long time. This goes back to the. Were we already in? No, we went in here. We're still in the Kari Square. The old days Sukkot. Before none of you were around then. So there was a story in those days. Shalom Duchman used to come, Chaim's brother-in-law, and spent Sukkot here. You remember that? Even once you moved here, the first 2 years, but it was all the first 10 years. They were very memorable. Sukkot every night. Fabreng was a whole different story then. Anyway, so this was the theme one year. It's a story Shalom Duchman told, and it was the theme of the whole Sukkot and the whole. In fact, it was a funny thing that your CBC, for some reason, decided to do a program on Jews celebrating Sukkot. And somehow they came to me to our Sukkah and filmed our kids in the Sukkah and interviewed my daughter Hannah, was 16. She asks, what is this whole holiday about? She explains, and what's the inspiration? She tells this story that she was listening by listening from the Fabrenga. Was on television. What's the story? The story, there was a Yid, his name was h'tשכ. The kid said, yeah, I think related to the Itkins, I think so. Anyway, he left Russia pretty early, before World War II, and settled in Yisrael in the early days, and he was caught up in, like many, in Zionism, etc. And he worked in the Palestine, it wasn't Israel then, Palestine, post office. Sure, 1929, the Frierdiker Rebbe comes to visit Israel. And he's embarrassed. He wants to see the Rebbe, but he's embarrassed to come to the Rebbe. He's embarrassed. So he worked in Tel Aviv. So when the Rebbe was in Tel Aviv, he knows he's going to want to go, but he's going to wear short pants that day, which was common. They wore these khaki short pants. He's not going to come in short pants to the Rebbe. Finished. So it wasn't unusual. That was his short pants. He's in there's a detail here about there being some traffic problem and a detour. Anyway, bottom line is, he ends up going to the Rebbe, to the Frierdiker Rebbe. Comes to the Rebbe, can't resist. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says to him these words, and this was the theme of the whole Sukkot. Yoel, he says to him something, Medreitzach, aber mezetzach, Medreitzach, we wander, but at the end, and we meet, and we come together. Because that's the Nakuda. We get involved in the end because I'm a Yid. It just doesn't, I can't. There's something, a deep dissatisfaction, a deep hole in the heart, this still small voice that says, no, the search. So that's the iskafia. And where does that come from? It comes because the neshama is a chelik, it's who I am, mimal mamish, that's the etzem. That's what drives the iskafia. And therefore that has to carry through in the ishapcha, in the transformation, in the glory, in the experience, in the love. Al derech zeh in Tanya. So the tzaddik, when it go from one level to the other, so there's the fall. But in the fall, says the Alter, these words, the reshima remains. What's this trace? Same Nakuda. And there he's talking about levels in love. What's the trace that's left? Not the love. But why love? What drives this whole thing? Adarabah, that reshima is even deeper than the actual love. Why is he engaged in this whole journey? What began it all? That's the reshima. That's the impression, as it were, the trace. There's very subtle atzmizdika connection. The desire, the longing. And why? Because I'm a Yid. I'm a part of you. So in between the levels of experience and glory, in the nefillah, what's there is the etzem is there. Why are you here? Because I'm a Yid. And I got to be connected to you. Clear? Okay, let's conclude the Maimer on page Membes Omnom. Omnom, however, so even though that the whole avoid is das tachten yichud tato, which means engage the world, Breishis, Not Achidush Hazeh Lachem, but that's the Kavanas Breishis. Mikol Mokim nonetheless. Kind of is said this before, but spelling it out further, I think. We'll see. However, in order that the avodah of das tacht, which is engagement in the world, be as it should be, that so much so that from there you'll progress to the higher levels of pure kedusha das elyon. At the outset, there's got to be the empowerment minion to das elyon v'chudiyah from das elyon v'chudiyah. He sends us to in the heart of 31, Kudatz Eitzachayim, where the Rebbe Rashab there says, if I'm not mistaken, it's what Chassidus Rebbe brings it frequently, that even though our reality is das tachten means this is real and we're striving, but you have to know das elyon. It's as a word, not in theory, but in seichel. Because that's what's going to drive the das tachten. Because if you don't know the das elyon, that the only reality is God, you're going to lose your way. The struggle is too great. The temptations are very powerful. We have to know it. You don't hold by it. And I think he says that you have to imagine it, and on some level, like a dimion. It's a dimion. It's imagining. But there's imagination. There's true. There's false imagination. There's true imagining. Dimion amiti, to at least understand in seichel das elyon. So that's why he's summarizing here. Even as the Torah begins with Breishis, which is saying, Kindalach, you're here for a job. We got to engage the world, elevate it. How's the pasuk framed? First thing you got to know is Shamayim. Not the first thing you know is there's a Welt. First thing is an Eibush that you have to know. And that's number one. Shamayim tchilim achakach oretz. First das elyon, and then the das tachten. Shezelnus in eskoyach, knowing that, establishing that, that's the in eskoyach. Shemitzat b'chinas das en v'chudiyah, that's the empowerment from there, which is b'chinas shamayim, kadesh shatuchol yisavadis haberudim, that empowers the yid to engage the world successfully. B'chinas das tachten v'chudiyah, which is das tachten v'chudiyah engagement. Al derech, this is similar, like we said before, Shekolis in the Breishis Barech the Torah. Where are we told that the Kavan is das tachten? In Torah, which altogether is das elyon. Because Mokim, by the end of the day, good, that's the empowerment. But what's the nitty-gritty of the daily grind? Ikar avodah ba'inyan habirudim, the avodah habirudim, nefesh habamis, and facing the world. B'chinas das tachten, v'chud tato, b'chinas eres dafka oretz. And that's how we draw down the primary essential levels of godliness, is dafka through engagement, and dafka through the struggle, and dafka through iskafia. That's why the narrative of creation, the conclusion, concludes, these are the chronicles of Shamayim v'Oretz when he created them. And then the final words, the final words are on the day that God completed or made earth and heaven. Eretz Tchila. The end is Eretz Tchila. That's the Dira B'tachtoinim. And that's also why Mashiach comes. The female transcends the male. The female is Malchus. The female is the Makabel. It's all the same general theme. The Tachten overtly. She becomes the crown over Baila, over Zoh, over Giloyim. That's going to be the end of the whole Avodah. That's now when Mashiach comes. When the promise will be fulfilled of Eilit Toildos, Mole, Peretz. The Medrash says that everywhere in Torah where the word Toildos is written, it's Choser. There's missing of Choser, means not with a Vav. There's only two places it's spelled fully. The end of creation, and Eila told this Peretz when later in the Divrei Yomim. Where is it? It'll tell this Pele, tell this Mole, 38. Yeah, but where is it? Divrei Yomim. The Peretz is the founder of Mashiach, coming from Rus, Peretz, Yishai, Peretz, etc. So that's written with a Vav. Why? Because by Mashiach, then the world is going to be Mole, the whole purpose fulfilled, which was there latently in the final pasuk of creation. We're going to a full world, a world suffused with godliness, with a Vav. When will it happen? With Mashiach. That's Ilotel this Peretz. Clear? That's the only two places where it's spelled full, where the Kavanah is laid out and when it's realized. Ilotel this Peretz. The Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu, and then it's interesting. It concludes with this pasuk. David Avdi Nasi Lem. This is from the Haftarah of Parshas Vayigash. Hey Tavis, talking about the two kingdoms, and they'll be united, Ephraim and Yehuda, and who will be the Nasi from Yehuda, from David. David Avdi Nasi Lehem Lo'elam. David will be their leader forever. Why David? Because David is in of Malchus. Yehuda again, Ishes Chayil, Dafka Maise, Bittel, Iskafia, all of that. Therefore, that's going to reign. He will reign supreme because it'll be the Dira with Dafka B'tachtoin. Okay, let us look at. And again, Fred, there's no substitute for learning it on your own, but we'll look at the Kitzur, not the Kitzur, the Teichen. Our president is here on the today. It's not.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I'm here.
Okay. Let's have a look at the Teichen Yonim. It's very, very brief. You see it there. Breishis Boroh Lekim. I sent it on the WhatsApp. The pasuk says, "Kel Deis Havaya." God is the God of knowledges in the plural. Yes, Das Elyon. What's that? And you remember that this is an unusual pirush in the Maamar of Das Elyon, which is L'mayla Yesh or L'mata Ai. What's the mata? Not biyah. The mata is, tell me, in this pirush, in this Maamar, the mata is the oir. That's nimshach from atzmos, the highest levels. That's the mata. And the taich ayin there is truly ayin. B'muhusay. That's a gilui of atzmos, nothing else. Pure God. So Das Elyon is the ayin shel yesha hamiti. As he says, he spells it out, he actually quotes it. Shu ayin be'etzim muhusay. That's Das Elyon. The Das Tachten, it's a different ayin. That's the ayin shel yesha nivra. That is, after many tzimtzumim, but we call it nothing because it's no thing that we can relate to in terms of tangibility. We can't grasp it with our physical minds, and it is not tangible like our world. So the chiddush of this Maamar, and apparently it's elsewhere too, I don't know where, it doesn't bring any Makaidas, is that the word ayin in both cases refers to likus. But in Das Elyon, the ayin is the oir that's nimshach from atzmos, and in Das Tachten, the ayin is the immediate source of mamalakal almin mislabish in our world. Even that's ayin because it's no thing that we can relate to in terms of the senses. B'avodas ha'odam, what's in avodah is yichudi ilah. That's yichudi ilah. What's yichudi ilah? Shiluv adnei b'avaya. What dominates is avaya. As we explained, right? The lower unity is Shiluv Vaibad, what dominates there is Malchus Adnai. So there's two avodas: is drawing godliness down and elevating the world. Drawing godliness down, it's tzaddikim basically. It doesn't go into it here, but it's about tshuva, it's malamata l'mayda. That's a tachlis kavon, it's tshuva. So zelga machli ben achidish is elachem. So that's why that's Nisan, it's Yes Mitzrayim, Hanoga Shalmalim Ateva, that's Yichudi Ilah, Teva's dissolved, and Breishis Boroh Likim, Hanoga Sateva. And that's for the question is V'lechein Lohoyet Tzadich Lahaschil, Esater Das Elyon, Torah, which is to begin with Das Elyon, should begin with Torah's B'lamayla Lamata, Torah's Elikus, in Machidik Shes Elachem. That's where it should begin. Because no, the tachlis is in abirurim. But why is it in Torah? It has to be in Torah because Gamma Biro the Shemban, the Ahor Shema, it says end of the Maimer, to elevate the world. We need the empowerment from above, from Torah, Shemban. Shazel Yana Torah. Ascholes Vikar Avoida, so the Ikar Avoida is das Tacht Vichud Tato. And the Lachar is Boim the Das and Vichud, then we get to Das and Vichud Yilo from Bain and Itit Tzadik. Sholachem Pasad Breishis. You start with Breishis, first it's a struggle, and then Gilu Yair, Torah, Yichud Yilo, Aval. This is the punchline. Yet, there are two things. First of all, you need the empowerment, therefore we always have to be connected to Yichud Yilo. Shalchein Shemaim Kodmu, that's why the Pasuk first Shemaim and then Oretz. But Ikaram Shochel, they are berudim b'das tacht v'chadila. But where's the avodah? It's an engagement. Shalachei nemar eile toildos. At the end, mole eretz v'shamayim eretz chila. He doesn't bring you in the kitzur the point we just learned that even as you're holding, it's implied here in the madrega of das tachten, you have to carry with you the whole the avodah v'skafia and the avodah of what of das tachten, because that's where is it all coming from? That's because of the Kavon El Yoina. We would never do this. It's the Kavon El Yoina to come down the Mata and engage the world. That's the true Atzmistic connection. So that's carried through in the higher Avodah, in Yichud Yilo, and Yichud Tata, in Shemayim. Okay, this is no substitute for relearning. So I hope that you will do so. Today's story